Good afternoon, good morning, hello. My name is Mapule. Welcome to Leading Ladies League, all books, Bible, and business. I'm just reintroducing myself because I've taken some time to think about what I want to do with the channel. We'll just see as the Holy Spirit leads. But basically, we'll be sharing about the Bible, we'll be sharing about books, and also business. And it's a lifestyle channel, so I will be sharing tidbits of my lifestyle on this channel. All right, now let's get into it. I was just reading a verse that says that bless the Lord. This is from Deuteronomy 18, Deuteronomy 8:18. Let me just quickly go there. Deuteronomy 8:18, because I was just praying about it and thinking about it. So it's Deuteronomy 8:18. I just got to that. Let's look for 18. But remember the Lord your God who gives you the power to gain wealth in order to confirm his covenant he swore to your fathers as it is today. So God gives us the power to gain wealth. You know, when I went to the verse, I was thinking the power to succeed, but the Bible actually says the power to gain wealth. So it confirms the fact that it is within God's plan and God's covenant and God's desire that his people may be people of wealth. And I'm not here to promote prosperity gospel, but I'm just here to say that poverty is not within the scope of God. And in this world that we live in today, poverty is by design. It's not something that just happens organically, but it's something that is by design. There are certain parts of the world that will be poor and certain parts of the world that will be rich by design. Maybe one day we will get into the economics of that, but to just give you a brief understanding or a brief thought about it, or my brief 2 minutes about it, the fact that famine is controllable in this time that we live in. In other words, in the olden days when God brought judgment over a certain area, over a certain nation, it would actually go with not just war, but also famine. Sometimes it would be a war, sometimes it would be famine. So it was something that people would know that, oh my goodness, we are going through this. Let us check ourselves. Maybe we are in judgment. You know, there's sin within our courts, there's sin within our yards, and then they would fix themselves up and really humble themselves. The Bible says that if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray, I will hear from heaven. And you know the verse. So that call for humbling, that call for corporate fasting, that call for community fasting, it would come, and consecration of the community at a certain period in time. It was because a certain sign has come in nature, a certain infamiliarity has come in nature. But today, the world is in such a design where food channels and food is actually controlled by certain bodies and certain organizations, and the flow of food is controlled, just like the flow of money is controlled. The flow of food is controlled. That is why we typically joke that we are actually 3 days away from a famine, the way that we live today, because it only takes stopping the trucks coming to your local grocery stores to actually get you hungry, because majority of us do not grow crops, majority of us do not grow livestock. And those are the primary things that we eat from. We don't even have grains that can last us a couple of months. We don't even have grains that can, at most, we probably have grains in our house that go for a month, not even 2 months, you know. So if a truck doesn't come, you might not even have food the next 2-3 days. That's literally how close you are to a famine. But because the system and the flow of food is actually controlled, you are able to get up and go to the supermarket and get food that is prepared for you, you know. And a lot of people of our time and generation don't know how to make food. So that said, when God says that he gives us the power to gain wealth, Now I realize, and I'm saying that poverty, because when we think of poverty, the next thing or the underlying tone for poverty is a famine, it's hunger, it's absence of food or a lack of food. We can come in and say lack of clothing, lack of shelter, but sometimes poverty comes in the sense of people might have a house but not have food to eat. Food is such a primary need. So it is within God's desire for us to be wealthy. In other words, to have a bit more abundantly. And with that abundance, we can share, we can help others. And that's how we reach the people. That's why Jesus is able to give and feed 5,000 people, not just through prayer, but through giving them food. But all this to say that it's very important for us as believers to actually come to spaces and come to places where we create channels for creation of wealth, because we are people of his covenant. And us being able to gain wealth, us being in positions of gaining wealth, is us also playing our part in confirming the covenant. And as a woman, it's very tricky, because personally I'm going through a very interesting phase, which is what I came here to share. I'm going through a very interesting transition, and I want to share that. I don't know if I should do it in this video or I must make another video altogether, but because I've started with this video where I'm talking about gaining wealth, let me just get into it. Wealth in our time, we think of it as gaining wealth. Let me just put it like that. Gaining wealth in our time, we think of it as something of dominance, as something of power, as something which is associated with assertiveness and maybe a bit of aggression, because we associate the gain of wealth with male characteristics, or what we see as male characteristics. And it's very difficult for women of our time to actually, if you're trying to be a feminine woman, it's a very tricky thing to find ways where, how can I make wealth, or how can I lead a business that is growing, that has people that are under or behind my leadership, and still be a woman of good character, as the Bible describes it, and still be a woman who is feminine. It is a very tricky thing with our time. And we women, and women who grew up in the time and generations that are around my age, we were not raised, and afterwards, we are not raised, most of us were not raised to be dependent. We're not raised with the understanding or the exaltation or the glorification of traditionally feminine roles. In other words, we kind of didn't see the value in being a housewife, for instance. We didn't see the value in raising children. We didn't see the value in just being a good wife for your husband. But we were raised to actually be the boss, be the boss babe, be the boss lady. And then we desired roles like that in whatever career and field that we would go into. Those are the roles that we would, those are the pictures that we pictured ourselves into. And it's still happening. So it's feminism, feminism, what we associate with feminism, and not femininity, but feminism. And so I think a lot of us find it very, very tricky to actually ease into wifery, or being a wife and being a housewife for others, and being a stay-at-home mom for others, and just being a very present mom. Because when you come from a country like mine, and I realize that in countries that are typically classified as first world, this is not necessarily the case. But when you come from a country like mine, if you're a career woman and you are doing well in your career, chances, and I'm not talking like you are excessively wealthy, you just have a career, you wake up every day and you go to the office, you're building a career, and it's not just a job, it's a career. You typically have you have someone that works in your house, you have somebody that takes care of your children, you have somebody that takes care and cleans your house for you. That is basically majority of women who are into a form of a career path in my country. That is the norm. And I realized that it's the case in most African countries. That is the case. I'm an African, so I'm going to speak from a context of being an African. I know that Africa generally, and this video might be watched by anybody in the world, but generally Africa is associated with being poor, not having enough, and being a third world continent. But to be honest with you, there's a lot more women who actually have servants in their house. And it might be the case also with first world countries. So I'm just going to speak from the context that I'm understanding, because a lot of us were raised to actually build careers, and that consequently came with actually having somebody to come into your home and take care of your children, come into your home and take care of your house, because those roles are not associated with success. Okay, now that that is out of the way, if we look at the Proverbs 31 woman, that woman was very feminine. She was a wife. She minded her own business and the issues and the matters of her own household, and she made her household warm. And also, over and above that, she took care of her husband. And that's why when her husband went to the square, in other words, when he was out in his role with other men, in his places where men meet, in whatever way and context it might mean in your society, when the man was out, he was such a dignified man in society because of the way that the wife took care of him. Now, I'm going to look at that aspect only. We, on the other hand, are raised where we question so much of what our parents used to do, what our mothers used to do, because some of us, or most of us, are raised by women who come from a generation, or grandparents. If it's not your mom, it's probably your grandmother, who come from a generation where they took care of their husbands, they cooked for their husband, they cleaned their houses. It wasn't even a conversation. But we never found motivation. We never found those skills. Some of them were never transferred to us. That honor, some of it was never transferred to us. We didn't even have so much respect for it, for those roles that they played. But as Christian women, we have that calling. It's something that I am easing into. It's not something that I'm going to claim to be an expert into, but it's something that is a new thing to me. It's something that I'm learning, because just like me, most of you are just like me, where we valued and highly valued careers and roles that required very male dominance, and we saw that. Even the movies that we watched, we would watch movies where we see boss babes, and I want to use the word boss babe because it makes sense. When you think boss babe, you know exactly what I mean. So we watched those roles, and those were things that we pictured ourselves doing, and now you get to do it, and it still doesn't bring the fulfillment. It still doesn't answer the question. And now you sit back and you're like, you know what is the most important thing to me? What things do I value? And if I had to bring my day 24 hours, where do I spend most of the time? Now, personally, I studied civil engineering, and I've worked in construction I'm still very much in the industry, but in a very different way. We do build roads, we build pipelines, we build infrastructure, city infrastructure. So it's civil engineering that. And so that kind of work and that kind of industry requires that you work at different places, and you work in a male-dominated industry, and a very male industry in its presentation, in its character. When I go on a site, I don't even look, right now I don't have makeup, I don't have anything, it's just my hair flow, and I'm very, very feminine. But when I go into my workplace, I look very male. I won't say that I look very male. It's not intentional. I buy feminine jeans, but the industry, the way it is, because majority of the time I'm in a space where I'm the only woman, and I'm outside in the sun. I'm in the elements. It might be in the cold as well if it's winter, and I'm in between machines, and I might not be doing the physical work. I might be doing the planning, you understand, but the substance of the industry is actually very much like that. It's literally building roads, building bridges, building infrastructure for cities and districts, and civil works. And so that said, you work in an industry. I'm not gonna work in one place every day. Sometimes I work in places that drive me far from my house. Sometimes I work in places that are close to my house, and I thank God for that, because when it's after school, I'm able to drive and check my kids. But most of the time I'd be in a town far from home. I'd be in a city far from home, and I have to drive home, and I arrive at home 7:30, for instance. My kids, they go to bed at 8. When I get to my house, I used to have help until we lost her. And when we lost her, I never really quite got someone that could really match the needs of the family. So, which pushed me into really coming into the role of taking care of my house myself, which is very difficult. Right now, I'm not in the role. My role in the construction industry is not it's not organized in such a way where I have to come back home at 7:30, which I'm so grateful for, because I'm able to drive out and pick up my kids. I'm able to take them to their sporting events. I'm able to go and watch their games. I'm able to know when their clothes are getting, I'm very much hands-on. I will talk about that probably when we discuss business, but right now I'm not in that. But I'm saying that I've lived a life like that. And to be honest, I wouldn't want to do it again. I was in a position to do it again this year, and it was the most frustrated time I've had. And I remember saying to my husband, this is the last time I'm doing this. And he was like, okay, we'll see. And I told myself that this is the last time I'm involved like this, because literally I have no time for my kids. I have no time for my family. I have no time. So, and I do say that with understanding that there's privilege behind it, because my life has been built in such a way that I'm able to make that choice and I'm able to make that decision. But I want to speak to women of my time and women who might be going through the same kind of transition. For me, I feel like it's a call for God, and I don't know how long it's going to last. Maybe it's going to last until my kids get to a certain age, and then now I get back to the same kind of grind again. I'm not going to put a cap to it, but I just want to encourage women who also feel the same kind of call, the same kind of dilemma, to say that there's nothing wrong with actually committing to your family and taking care of your family. And women who might be struggling with issues of homemaking and being a housewife or being a wife and fully taking care of your family and your husband, do it. Whatever your hands find to do, do it as if you're doing it unto the Lord. And if God has called you for that period of your life, because the Bible says that the steps of a righteous man are ordered by the Lord. If God has called you into that role for now, get into it and do it with the utmost commitment. And I believe that God will honor that, because God honors commitment. I've got testament and testimony of that God honors commitment. Thank you for joining me. We will be doing more on this channel. And have a beautiful week.